Next, please, James. All right, so you started out with Gardner, you then had Warshak, and you had Bohm. And so now there's a move afoot of about slightly under 100 worldwide experts who believe that parental alienation syndrome should be elevated to a psychiatric disorder, all right? They are in the minority, but they're pushing very hard for it to be put into the DSM-5, which is going to be published in the next year or so. And they say parental alienation is a mental condition in which a child, usually one whose parents are engaged in a high conflict divorce, exhibits the following behaviors: allies himself strongly, rejects a relationship, and it's without legitimate justification. Remember, if it's legitimate, you may be in a situation of estrangement. Next, please. So his criteria: maladaptive behavior. The refusal of the child to see one of the parents is driven by a false belief that the alienated parent is dangerous or an unworthy person. Next. The primary behavioral symptom is that the child refuses or resists contact with that parent, or the child's there in spirit, all right? Sorry, the child's there physically, but not in spirit. So they'll come, they're sullen, they don't talk to you, they go to the room, they play on their Game Boy, they play on their cell phone, whatever. They refuse to do anything with that parent whatsoever. So that's the extreme withdrawal or the gross contempt, where they will swear at the parent, they will disobey that parent, they will damage property at that parent's home, all right? Primary mental symptom is the child's irrational anxiety and hostility toward the rejected parent. Next, please. Primary behavioral symptom: refuses or resists contact with the parent. We've got the extreme withdrawal, we've got the gross contempt. Next. The mental symptom, is the irrational anxiety. So that's just the 2-point snapshot of what they say the criteria should be for inclusion in the DSM-V. Next, please. You look at the behaviors of an alienated child. We've got anger, blame. The child's speech will be brittle, it'll be obsessed, it'll be artificial. Sometimes you'll see a child sitting on the lap of a parent and smiling and saying, "I hate you." And so it's just very bizarre. That can happen with a young child, okay? It's harder for a younger child to be brainwashed because they don't have the cognitive skills yet, all right? So they're the ones that often will tip off a psychologist or a psychiatrist to alienating behavior going on. As the child gets older, it's a little bit more difficult to detect, all right? Mimics what the siblings reported, not their own experience. So you'll have, quite often, if you get a older child, that older child will become the spokesman for the younger children. That will be in charge of sort of making sure the younger siblings who may still want to go and see dad or mom toe the line, all right? So they act like a parent to the younger ones to get them to ally with the alienating parent. Expresses worry for the preferred parent, all right? A desire to care for that parent. So this is the parent that is fragile or weak or has psychiatric issues and says, "You can go see mommy if you want, but I hope I'm going to be okay." So that puts the child in a position of fear of letting that parent down, or fear of letting that parent be alone. Next. So that's the child behaviors, right? So what are the alienating parent behaviors? Allows and insists that the child makes decisions about contact, all right? Gets them brainwashed, gets them to start making these statements, repeats those statements to the other parent, and then says, "I gotta respect what the child says because that child has a voice," okay? Tells the child, "Oh, too bad you were away with daddy this weekend because we went to Playland," all right? Indulges the child with material possessions. So there'll be a Game Boy, there'll be a PS3, there'll be a big trip right after the separation, or right before perhaps a visit, so that, "I just got you a PSP, but you can go to your dad's if you want," all right? Sets few limits or is too rigid. So there's a change of what the pattern for that child was. And of course, no concern for missed visits, because the alienating parent doesn't think that those visits are of any value to the child whatsoever, and in fact are damaging. Next, please. More alienating parent behaviors. has no compunction about talking about the reasons why the marriage broke down. So, parent left us, he divorced us, does not love us. It's all us, okay? So that the child is a target of daddy or mommy leaving. Not that daddy or mommy left the other parent, but that they left the children, all right? Exaggerates all the negative attributes, doesn't say anything positive, all right? When the child calls the alienated parent and is quiet or non-communicative, the parent will wrongly assume that's pressure from the target parent. The child's not comfortable with the target parent. It's proof of bad parenting. Look, the child doesn't even want to talk to you, okay? And does not appreciate that the child's uncomfortable talking to the alienating parent about the target parent. So that child doesn't want to look too friendly on the phone in front of the alienating parent because it's a loyalty test. So what do they have to do? They have to be, right, okay. Next. What are the consequences of the current and future parental alienation problems? It's not simply a minor aberration in the life of the family. It's a serious mental condition, and because of the false belief that the alienated parent is a dangerous or unworthy person, the child loses one of the most important relationships in his or her life. It leads to a tragic outcome when the child and the alienated parent who previously had a good relationship loses the nurture and joy of that relationship for many years and perhaps for their lifetimes. And a lot of children who went through parental alienation and told the psychologist that they didn't want to see one of the parents, when studied again in their 20s and 30s, said, I really wish that someone had made us go see that parent because we wanted to, but we felt we couldn't. And so all the time while they're making these statements, there's still that deep down inside sort of feeling of that child of love for that targeted parent. And so there's sort of a cry for help, but it doesn't often occur until quite a bit later and after a lot of damage has been done. Next. There's a lot of evidence and systematic research that it causes both short-term and long-term consequences from minor distress to major psychopathology. And those are a number of the authors. You've got Baker, Gardner, Darnell, more towards the end of parental alienation occurring a lot. You've got Olison, you've got Johnson, I'm not sure about Lowenstein, but they're more on the scale of it's multifaceted, it's not happening as much as people say it is, okay? And again, those are the type of experts that you will want to choose carefully in your case, right? Because if you really think there's parental alienation going on, you don't want an expert whose track record is always finding no such thing. Next. What do the authors say about children that are the victim of the problem? They'll have poor self-image, they'll have low self-esteem. As a result of rejecting an innocent parent, they'll experience long-term guilt and other negative thoughts and feelings, anxiety and depression, where the children have been made to choose one parent over the other. They're put in a, we call it a no-win or a double-bind situation. And obviously it's not surprising that they develop this anxiety, depression, and sometimes even suicidal ideation. They'll have trust issues. You know, if a child learns he can't trust one of their parents or learns to hate a parent, how's that going to assist them in future relationships? Dependency and self-sufficiency issues. A child who's been forced to conform to expectations and pressures of an alienating parent is likely to become overly dependent on that parent for many years to come. Next, please. Fear of abandonment. They've got loss, they've got intimacy issues, and they've got impairment of cognitive and thinking skills because they learn the ability to think for themselves, okay? They become a puppet or an agent of the distorted thinking of one of the adults. They come up with black and white thinking. Obviously, the target teen parent is all good and the targeted parent is seen as all bad. Obviously not healthy. Next, please. Levels of severity. All right, so we've got various levels. And one of the things you've got to do when you think you're involved in a parental alienation case is, number one, you need a lawyer who's experienced in that, all right? Number two, you need an expert that is experienced in parental alienation. You don't want just a regular psychologist. And three, you want a judge hired or assigned right off the bat that stays with the case as long as possible so that you're not jumping from judge to judge and those judges don't have the whole history and the whole picture of what's going on, okay? So we got it mild. The child will resist contact with the alienated parent, but once they go, they're very happy, okay? And they still have a strong and healthy relationship with both parents, even though that child will recite criticism. So you might have a young child on the lap saying, "I hate you, Daddy," but laughing and bouncing up and down in the lap and hugging him at the same time. Mild. Moderate, starting to strongly resist contact, persistently oppositional during the parent time. So they're physically but not in spirit, back talk, ignoring, wanting to go home all the time, asking to be taken back, okay? There's going to be some mild to moderate problems with the relationship with the preferred parent, okay? So it's not just a problem of the relationship with the targeted parent, it's with the parent that they're with as well, all right? Once it gets to the severe stage, the child strongly and persistently resists contact, will hide or run away. The child's behavior will now be driven by a firmly held false belief that the alienated parent is evil, dangerous, or worthless. So you'll start to hear key words, all right? The child's going to have a strong and severely pathological relationship with the preferred parent, the custodial parent, and starts to share perhaps a paranoid worldview, okay? Next, please. What are the levels of intensity of alienation behavior, all right? So we've got mild, moderate, and severe levels of alienation, but what types of alienators are there, okay? So you've got the naive alienator. They may make negative comments, but without serious intent to undermine the child's relationship. They may be careless, and in general, the naive, we call them alienators, support the child's relationship. So you may get some mild alienation here. This person may not know they're doing it. This person may do the poor me thing, like, "Oh, you can go see your dad if you want. I was thinking we could go to the park today." That type of behavior. You then move to active. They're more consistent, they're more determined. There's an intentional desire to criticize and undermine the targeted parent. Deep down, however, active alienators realize that what they're doing is wrong and potentially harmful, all right? So you've got a parent that's mad at the parent that left them, maybe wants to get back at them, knows the soft underbelly is to interfere with that person's relationship with the children, will take this role, all right? You move down to the worst one of all, that's the obsessed alienator. They want to destroy the child's relationship with the targeted parent. They're extremists, they pressure that child to adopt their own negative view, they put a tremendous amount of pressure on the child to emphatically reject the targeted parent, and they can't tolerate a good relationship between the child and the targeted parent. Loyalty here. The child's put in a severe loyalty bind. If they express anything about liking the other parent, they're a traitor to this. So this one is probably the worst one, and as we'll see, we might have to do what is called a parentectomy. That's where you're going to have to remove that parent for a prolonged period of time so that the child can rebond with the targeted parent. So parentectomy. Next, please. What are the recommended treatments? So the treatments will differ depending on the level of the severity of the alienation and the type of alienator that you're dealing with, all right? So it's preventable and treatable if you get involved early. That's why you want the lawyer that knows what he's doing, the psychologist that knows what he's doing, and a judge that sticks with the case all the way through, all right? You want all three of those. It's hard to get all three of those, all right? But you've got to fight for it. If it's mild, you might hire this parenting coordinator, all right? Who helps the parents communicate in a constructive manner and gives them specific advice. You take it out of the court system, essentially. If you're dealing with one person, that person can make rulings and can try to educate the parents about their naive behaviors or their inappropriate parenting deficiencies, for example. If it goes to moderate, then we're going to need more intensive therapy as well as meetings with a parenting coordinator. And if there are multiple therapists involved with the divorced family, they must agree regarding the nature of the problem. So one of the problems with everyone having their own therapist is that nobody really knows the overall picture. So ideally, you'd like to have one therapist deal with the entire family unit, all right? There can be problems, however, with confidentiality, though, because if one of the parents has some severe problems, that parent may need to go to that psychologist or psychiatrist for those problems, separate and apart from the problem of alienation, right? Because a lot of people that are the obsessed or active alienators have more psychiatric problems than just despising their spouse, okay? Next, please. What happens if it's severe? Traditional forms of psychotherapy are likely not to be effective. The alienating parent is intractable. The children are now intractable in their false beliefs. They've got a problem that is reaching the stage of it becoming a delusional disorder. It's probably been induced by the obsessed alienating parent. In cases of moderate, it can also be an obsessed alienating parent. The problem is that they just haven't had enough time now to really do a number of them on the child, or the child's quite young and doesn't have the cognitive skills to process all the hatred and turn it into an attack on that parent. When it's been caused by the obsessed alienating parent and it's severe, you're going to have to go to transfer in custody. So you've got, in the case of the primary parent that's doing it, warning, increasing of access, going to 50-50, and ultimately, if it doesn't stop, going to sole custody or primary residence to the other parent, all the way to no access now by that obsessed alienator